Hello, and in today's video I'm going to talk about the Nazi German war economy. I'm doing it with me and rather than doing it as a documentary type video because this is what YouTube wants, because it sort of gives a bit authority apparently to it. We'll see if that's the case or not. So in as far as this reinterpretation of the Nazi German war economy, we've got to think of Fritz Todt and Albert Speer. Now, I've already done a couple of videos on this subject. First question, what I tried to answer was did Albert Speer have anything to do with the death of Fritz Todt? And the answer is, of course, he didn't. And the second thing I did was to compare what we can read in Inside the Third Reich, which gives a very detailed account of the economy of Nazi Germany and other things. But I think we need to see that through the light of when it was written. Albert Speer was an absolutely incredible success. Well, he was after the war ended, and he certainly managed to convince many people as to what a great job he did and how innocent he was of some of the things that happened in that regime. But here I'm going to have a look at what the facts behind it actually were. So, having said all that, so we can say many people consider Nazi Germany's wartime economic mobilisation through this sharp division of what was happened before when Fritz Todt was in command, early war economy, which was chaotic, and later it became rationalised, efficient production. That's all thanks to Albert Speer. Now, this interpretation, however, doesn't withstand any close examination of administrative practice, economic policy, wartime decision making. The transformation of the German war economy had occurred under Fritz Todt, and it was determined by structural necessity. And this, I think, is something which isn't very well understood. The prevailing post-war interpretations of the German war economy were shaped largely by Allied perspectives. Research efforts such as the United States Strategic Bombing Survey and British official histories are focused on questions of immediate relevance to Allied policymakers, including the effectiveness of Allied strategic bombing, the impact of the blockade, the evaluation of competing air war doctrine. As a result, Germany's economy has often been examined from the outside. It's a system reacting to external pressure, that's to say, largely the bombing, rather than from within, as an evolving administrative and institutional structure. This perspective has encouraged a simplified chronology. Albert Speer is appointed in February 1942 because Fritz Todt has a mishap, and I think that's probably the best way of describing it. He had an accident, and then Speer took over and everything was okay as far as the Nazi German war economy was concerned. So you've got a convenient explanatory breakpoint. Economic organisation before his arrival was all disordered, inefficient, and paralysed with bureaucratic rivalries. He takes over, and everything, thanks to him, is administrative rationalisation, central planning, and thus unlocking Nazi Germany's productive potential. It's all a load of nonsense, but that's what's been commonly believed. In this framework, Fritz Todt, he's a transitional figure, and it was thanks to him dying. He's probably very good at building motorways, but he wasn't much good at running the economy. But once he's out of the way, the economy can really explode. Now, the reality is that the Nazi German war economy occurred before 1942, and it occurred before Speer's appointment and before Todt's death. The catalyst was military rather than ministerial innovation. The failure of the Blitzkrieg, expectations following the Soviet winter counteroffensive, which started on 7th of December 1941, the loss of Rostov-on-Don, which might seem to be somewhat insignificant, but clearly frightened the Nazi leadership, and the recognition that Germany faced a prolonged war of attrition forced a fundamental shift in economic strategy. So we have this transition from a short war economy to a total war economy. It was structurally compelled and it was, I think, above all, due to the events at the beginning of December 1941. But in reality, it had started even before then. It certainly wasn't due to the individual brilliance of Albert Speer, who of course had no experience in doing such things previously. Within this context of changing everything around, now Fritz Todt played an essential and initiating role. He had already begun dismantling the cost-plus procurement system that dominated early wartime armaments contracts. Under the guidelines for the calculation of costs for public contracts, firms were reimbursed for full production cost plus a guaranteed profit margin, a mechanism that rewarded inefficiency by linking higher costs to higher profits. Todt recognized that such a system was incompatible with sustained large-scale mobilization and moved to replace it with fixed-price contracts that incentivized cost reduction and rationalization. The introduction of fixed-price contracting predated Speer's tenure. By December 1941, it had already been implemented in key sectors and was widely established by the time that Todt died. Todt presented proposals to extend fixed-price contracts across the armament production industry to Hitler in February 1942, only a few days before he died. Opposition from Goering's four-year plan organization demonstrates that Todt was actively challenging entrenched interests rather than defending existing arrangements. And here we must, I think, understand something which is absolutely fundamental, is that why would Goering be opposed to fixed price contracts? Well, if you've got the previous system which allowed to take a total turnover plus a profit margin, or total cost I should say rather than total turnover, plus a profit margin, and then that allowed people to inflate the costs and thus who could actually benefit from them. Well, if you've got an expensive place like Cowan Hall and a number of other similar properties to maintain, you might want to see these costs actually increased. So therefore, this is really important to it. Now, inside this Third Reich, Speer writes of a meeting he had with Goering, where Goering wanted to, so the four-year plan was to be more important than whatever Speer came across, and he outlines in this conflict that was beginning with Goering, which Todt didn't have. And I think now, with hindsight and on reflection, that this might be fictitious. But I haven't given it enough thought, so I might change my mind on that one. So there's another important change associated with Speer, which was the evolution of a committee system. Now, the idea of having a committee of various companies coming together was intended to pressurize inefficient firms by benchmarking them against leading producers. The system was developed under Todt into a tool for analyzing entire production chains. By the autumn of 1941, it became evident that inefficiency were often concentrated in specific production phases rather than in entire factories. Todt responded by restructuring the committees to permit detailed phase-by-phase comparison and targeted rationalization, anticipating later claims of scientifically managing production. Now, normally businesses don't come together because they're competing, but this was obviously a wartime economy. Now, administrative centralization was another key objective. Todt recognized the necessity of concentrating economic authority within a single ministry capable of coordinating armaments, transport, raw materials, and labor. Fragmentation, particularly the dispersal of component production amongst thousands of small firms, generated transport bottlenecks and obstructed effective oversight. Central control was intended both to rationalize armaments output and to impose tighter constraints on civilian production. By late January 1942, Todt had submitted recommendations that would have effectively created a proto-war ministry under his leadership. Contemporary testimony indicates that decisive steps towards such a structure had already been taken. The meeting of all committee chairpeople, or chairmen, I think, because they were all men, on the 6th of February 1942, 2 days before his crash, marked a turning point. For the first time, leading production figures convened within a single ministry to coordinate policy, signalling the erosion of the traditional military procurement bureaucracy's authority. Now, Albert Speer inherited this framework. He didn't create it, and as I've just shown, it started before he was appointed. The administrative consolidation reform program were already underway when he assumed office. Many of the powers he later claimed to have obtained immediately upon appointment had already been secured, or were on the verge of being secured by Todt. Continuity is evident in early policy communications to regional party leaders, justifying restrictions on civilian consumption, which had been drafted before Speer took office. Increases in armaments production, often attributed to Speer, must also be understood in this context. The substantial rise in production during 1942 largely reflected earlier planning decisions and a changed strategic orientation rather than immediate, if not sudden, administrative intervention. Structural reforms require time to generate measurable effects, and production gains observed only in weeks after a change in leadership can't possibly be attributed to newly implemented policies. Acknowledging this continuity does not require denying Speer's organizational abilities. He proved effective in expanding and consolidating the system he inherited. What must be rejected is the notion that Germany's wartime economic mobilization was rescued by a single appointment in February 1942. That interpretation emerged from post-war analytical priorities, selective use of sources, and Speer's own retrospective self-preservation. Fritz Todt's death did not remove an obstacle of reform. It interrupted a process already well advanced. The close correspondence between Todt's late initiatives and Speer's early actions indicates institutional inheritance rather than a revolutionary change. Todt must therefore be recognized as the first architect of Nazi Germany's transition towards a centrally directed war economy capable of sustaining resistance despite severe material constraints. The broader implication is historiography. Disputes over individual credit obscure the extent to which economic mobilization was driven by structural necessity, administrative continuity, and cumulative institutional change. Careful examination of contemporaneous documentation reveals continuity, whereas later accounts asserted rupture and systematic compulsion, where memoir literature claimed personal innovation. And as I'm always saying, you've got to go back to original sources. And Albert Speer, writing in the 1960s, he also wrote some stuff in Nuremberg, of course, but wasn't really an individual source. His objective was to make himself look good, and so therefore he changed things as were required. It could of course been that he actually saw things in this light whilst he was in prison and after he was released. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. But from our point of view, looking at this, we have to. Lots of things that Albert Speer said are highly suspect, but we know that now. In fact, we even knew it in his lifetime. But he got away with it, like many did, and he got away with it because of the way he behaved after the war as a pundit who was open to all, and he would happily go on to television programs and the likes, and he would happily admit the guilt of others and he played, I think, a certain role. He behaved very modestly as well, because for example, he compared what he did with those of his predecessor in the First World War, saying that his predecessor did a far better job. It's things of this nature. And even towards the end, when he was asked about Holocaust, and he's saying, well, look, I should have known, I chose not to know. Things of this nature. So that is how he managed to be reborn and do it again. But lots of things really just don't stand up to scrutiny. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting. I don't really like doing things on screen. I'd much rather do a documentary video. But YouTube has now decided that it wants people on screen showing original opinions, and that's what it says. I mean, we all know that it gives preference to AI slop over researched history. And so whereas this was relatively easy for me to do, I mean, some of my videos I have been working on now for many years. In one case, I've been working on, it's coming to the 6th anniversary of a video I've been writing on Mengele and his escape from Europe in the late 1940s. And so unfortunately, with the advent of AI, it's giving us, those of us who are doing real history, a very difficult job. So I'm doing original research, I'm going into archives, I'm going into museums and other places. I'm looking for the original materials, and so that is why you should subscribe to me if you're interested in real history. If you're not interested in real history, then you can stick to the AI slop, which is probably better presented than this is. Right, but if you want the facts, you want the real facts, then I will give them to you. So I upload every day. 2000 hours my time. I live in Poland and Central Europe, although currently I'm actually in the United Kingdom, but I usually am in Poland or in Germany, and so that's 1900 hours upload time in the UK, and all sorts of different times in different places. I have a members only subscription-based channel or service, I should say. Currently, members have access to more than 800 of my videos, and members only. And whereas a lot of them are quite short, but there are one or two sort of longer ones like this one as well. And that costs £5, €6, or $6. And that you can go to the members tab, I think, and you can see what I've actually got available there. Anyway, good. So please make a comment below. Just write hello or something, hi or whatever. It doesn't matter. You don't even have to write a comment. Just write a dot if you can't think of anything to say. And but anything, and that will and respond to others who've just left a dot or 2 dots, and that will hopefully encourage the algorithm to give some kind of support to people like myself who are doing real history, real research, and not just AI slop, where they get the AI to write them a video and then put it together. And in the time it's taken me to do this, I could have actually gone on to Gemini, say, write me a video on Fritz Todt and Albert Speer, and it would have done it. It would have probably been totally inaccurate, but it would have done it, and I'd have had a ready-made video like that. Anyway, so if you want real history written by real people, real research, then be with me. Thank you.